Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. It's wonderful to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio. Where would you like to go today? What would you like to learn about? I mean, it's a cold winter's day as you're viewing this, I imagine, at least here in North America. You know, how about California? Okay, we'll get back to that. In today's segment of Points of Light Radio, we are going to be featuring an organization that I have been trying to feature since we started our journey, right? And in fact, at one point in time, I was told that by the organization that it wasn't going to happen. Well, guess what? Today, we did an end run, right? And that organization is the Grange, or as it's officially named, the National Grange of the Order of Patrons of Husbandry. Well, that's a lot of talking there. So that's, from here on in, we'll just call them the Grange. But the Grange is a social organization in the United States that encourages families to band together to promote the economic and political well-being of the community and agriculture, right? So essentially, it was founded as more of a rural organization. Like the Grange was founded in 1867, and it is the oldest American agricultural advocacy group. In 2005, the Grange had membership of 160,000, with organizations in 100 communities within 36 states. The headquarters of the Grange is in Washington, D.C. Now, there are 7 degrees of Grange membership. There's a ceremony for each degree as it relates to, and they relate more to the seasons and use various symbols and principles. I'll let my guest expand on that with you. Now, when the Grange first began in 1867, it borrowed some of its rituals and symbols from Freemasonry, including its oaths. There were secret meetings and special passwords. Now, we'll see if that still exists, okay? Right? So, but further to all this, there were some notable members within the Grange down through the years. One of them was Norman Rockwell, who we all know was an American painter. But there were also 2 American presidents. First of all, Franklin Roosevelt, as well as his wife Eleanor, were both members of the Grange. Harry S. Truman, his successor, was also a member of the Grange. Now, my guest for this segment of Points of Light Radio is Stephen Hood. I interviewed him late last year, and Mr. Hood is the president of Central Union Grange number 559 in Lemoore, California. Like I said, I've been wanting to interview someone from the Grange since this started. I'd pretty much given up, and all of a sudden, this gentleman contacted me. Isn't that wonderful? So, let's go talk to Mr. Hood. But I'm going to ask you again, are you still thirsty for knowledge? Are you still searching for the light? Then you just trim your lamp and follow me. Here we go. Stephen Hood, welcome to Points of Light Radio.
Thank you.
So you were a member of the National Grange of the Order of Patrons of Husbandry.
Correct.
So why don't you tell my listeners and viewers about yourself?
Well, I live in Fresno in the middle of California. I grew up in a little town about a half an hour south of here. Um, Went to junior college and college here in the area. Got a teaching credential, moved to Los Angeles, and taught elementary school in LA for about 16 years. And got tired of the big city and moved back up here to Fresno. Been up in this area since then. Um, I have guardianship of my 15-year-old niece. I've had her for about 4 years now, so kind of an unexpected parent.
Mm.
I enjoy that. And what else would you like to know, Stan?
Well, what Grange do you belong to?
Well, I am a member of Central Union Grange, number 559, and we meet in Lemoore, California, which is about 40 miles south of Fresno.
Okay. Now, do you meet in a Grange building or do you share the space with somebody else?
Our Grange does not have its own hall.
Mhm.
So we actually, the Grange did have a hall, which was the old Central Union School building, but they sold it back in the 70s, I believe. We actually still have the funds in a special account reserved for if and when we want to get back into a Grange hall, and we're actually kind of scoping things out to see if we could possibly get back into a Grange hall. So right now we meet at the Veterans Memorial Building in the city of Lemoore.
Okay. Now, tell us about the Grange itself, though. What exactly do they do? I understand they were set up as more of a something for agricultural, but what do they do these days?
Well, let me give you a little bit of history. Today, December 4th, is actually the 156th anniversary of the founding of the Grange.
Okay,
Uh,
that's great.
the man who came up with the idea, his name was Oliver Hudson Kelly, and he worked for the precursor to the USDA. He worked for the Agriculture Department, and he was tasked by President Lincoln to survey the conditions of the rural South after the conclusion of the Civil War. And so he went down to the South, this Yankee from the North, and he was having a really hard time. And the only way that he was able to make connections with folks down there was through his Masonic membership. And that helped him get around the South. And he came to the conclusion that people in rural areas need some kind of an organization to help support farmers and people who live in rural rural areas. So he returned to Washington, D.C. and got together with 6 of his buddies, and along with his niece, Carolyn Hall, they organized the Grange back in December 4th, 1867. And the Grange is the oldest family farm fraternity organization in the United States. We're one of the biggest supporters of agriculture and folks that live in rural areas. Over the years, we've sponsored legislation fighting the railroad monopolies. That's what made the Grange really boom back in the 1870s. We've supported issues like rural free delivery from the post office, rural electrification, and all kinds of issues to help those folks who live in the rural areas. Right now, one of our biggest projects that the National Grange has been working on is getting internet out into the rural areas, high-speed internet. And we actually have a project going on where local granges can share information about getting high-speed internet out into rural areas.
So it's amazing. You really get that sense of history, don't you, when you hear of why it was set up and why there's actually still a need for it, actually, that advocacy type thing. Really, you do see it, can't don't you, with what you just
Absolutely. And actually it's just as important now.
I
The
agree with you.
Grange has just completed its second year of membership growth,
Okay, well,
and that hasn't happened in over 70 years. So we're finding excitement in the Grange through a lot of our different programs. People are wanting to get involved in community organizations again, and we're one of the very few fraternal / community oriented organizations that are actually showing growth right now.
you know what? It's amazing you said that. I am sensing that from I've been at this for over a year. This with Points of Light, and I am sensing that. Could we be seeing a shift as people move back to these organizations? Do you think?
I think so. Um,
And why do you think, though?
I I think it's a generational thing. Um,
Or
uh,
post-COVID,
well,
or just the failure of the system itself, government programs, the hell, or what is it?
I think it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
I think a lot of younger people are the millennials and young folks they're seeing the importance of working together to improve their communities. Um, and even the generations a little bit older are realizing that the government's not there to do everything for us.
yeah, they can't.
Um, and working together on certain issues can really show some success for folks who are working on some kind of a project to improve their community.
So does the Grange still? I understand, like you talked about the Masonic roots, and I understand the Grange used to have, or does it? Do they still have, shall we say, a degree system?
We sure do. Our ritual is based on 7 degrees,
Okay.
and the first 4 degrees are the responsibility of the local Grange. It's pretty rare these days that you see the exemplification of these 4 degrees, but they are quite impressive. They're based on the 4 seasons of the year in the farm and in the farm home. They teach 4 really important lessons: faith, hope, charity, and fidelity. And then the 5th, 6th, and 7th degree are handled by our county organizations, which we call Pomona Grange, our state Grange, and our national Grange. And in the Grange, our officers are based on what the word Grange comes from, which means farm in Old English. And so prior to recent years, we now use the terms president and vice president in a lot of cases, but the president of the Grange was called the master. And in Old England, that was the owner of the farm estate. And then the vice president was called the overseer, and that was the person that basically ran the farm for the master or the owner. We have an officer called a steward. That is a person on the farm who would go around, oversee the laborers, and catch weeds they might have missed and things like that. But we have 3 officers that are called the Graces, and it's the office of Ceres, Pomona, and Flora. And they come from the ancient Greek goddesses of agriculture. Ceres was the goddess of grain. Pomona was the goddess of fruit, and Flora the goddess of flowers. And these three officers, along with a fourth officer, the lady assistant steward, are officers that can only be held by women.
Well,
And since I brought that up, the Grange was the first national organization to allow women membership on an equal basis as men, and this was right from the very start. And like I said, there are actually 4 officers that can only be held by women at every Grange level.
but let's get back to those degrees, though. Now, you said the first
Sure.
4 you can get right in your Grange,
Right.
your local,
And
but the last 3, what do you have to?
the last 3 are,
get them, or does someone?
yeah, the last 3, the Pomona Grange, which is our county or district or area level Grange, they do the degree of Pomona, and it's lessons based on the goddess Pomona and fruit and things like that related to that area. The state Grange does the degree of Flora,
Okay.
and then the National Grange does the degree of Ceres.
So you actually would have to travel for these degrees, or they would be held once a year, or?
Yes, our state and national Granges each meet once a year.
Okay.
But as an example of what might happen, a year ago, the National Grange Convention was held in Sparks, Nevada. And so here in California, we actually traveled around the state to a few places to put on the 6th degree around the state through the year, so that our local members would already have the 6th degree if they wanted to attend the National Grange session to receive the 7th degree.
And now, how long does it take at least to get the first 4? Do you do degree rally where you put
right now? Like I said, it's very rare that the first 4 degrees are done anymore. So we have alternatives to that. We have a Grange welcoming ceremony or the Grange obligation ceremony, which gives you full membership when you attend your first Grange meeting and go through the obligation ceremony or the welcoming ceremony.
Now, those other degrees, those last 3, how long does it take to get those? Or the ceremonies maybe an hour?
They're about an hour or so.
Okay, yeah.
Each one of them.
Very elaborate, or?
What do you consider elaborate?
No, I mean like a proper ceremony, actors, things like that, or just?
Well, the officers have charges that they state as the candidates
Okay.
go around the room.
Mm-hmm.
There's the 7th degree is actually a stage play.
Okay, beautiful.
The National Grange is considering changing the structure a little bit of the 7th degree, but for the last many years, it's actually done as a stage play.
Okay. Now, do you ever see them bringing back the first 4 degrees, shall we say, and reinstituting them somehow, or no?
Oh, certainly. I mean, they're still there. They're in our manual. And out west, you don't see a whole lot of them, but there are still Granges back in New England where I've heard that you don't become a Grange member until you've seen all 4 degrees exemplified.
Okay. Now, that's the other thing I meant to ask you about the degrees.
Sure.
What degree do you need, shall we say, to lead a Grange?
You're not a full Grange member until you've had the 4th degree.
Okay. So you at least need that to lead a Grange. What about holding executive offices, like you said, within the state and so on? Would you need to have your 7th degree?
You need to have the degree of the office of the level that you're holding an office in.
Okay.
So if you would like to be a Pomona Grange officer for your local Pomona Grange, you need to have the 5th degree already. The same for the 6th at state level and 7th for the National Grange level.
Okay. Now you say you belong to to your local Grange. How long has your local Grange been around?
I believe our local Grange was organized in the 1930s.
Okay. And how many members do you have?
Our Grange is a fairly small Grange. We're sitting at about, I think, 34, 36 members right
That is
now.
still good. Wow, compared to a
And
lot of
then our average meeting attendance is probably about 12 to 15.
yeah, that's very typical.
Because about half of our members don't reside in the local area.
Okay.
They've either grown up in the Grange and have moved elsewhere, or were former member or were formerly local area people that have moved away.
Okay. Now, what would you say is the makeup of your Grange, though? Old, young, women, millennials?
Our Grange is extremely diverse.
Good.
We have 2 Junior 1+ members. So kids can actually join the Grange when they're 4.5 years old. The Grange has a program called the Junior Grange.
Good.
When I was a kid, my parents belonged to Riverdale Grange. Riverdale is the town where I grew up, and we organized a Junior Grange. And that's just like any other Grange. You have to have 13 people to organize the Grange, and we had a Junior Grange there in Riverdale. Oh, probably for about 10 or 12 years, we had an active Junior Grange that I grew up as a member. These days, because of corporate structure and the inability for somebody who's between the ages of 4.5 and 14, which is the age of the Junior Grange, they're not legally able to be officers of an organization.
No.
So the National Grange came up with a program called the Junior 1+ program, where you can have as few as 1 child join your Grange as a Junior 1+ member. And we actually have 2 Junior 1+ members in our Grange right now, children of one of our members that come. And then you can join the regular Grange at 13.5.
So what drew you to it was your parents were in it, and they kept you involved in it, right?
So I'm actually a 3rd-generation Grange member.
Wow.
My mom's parents, my grandparents were members. And then my mom joined when she was a teenager.
Wow.
And then when my parents got together and married, my dad joined the Grange.
Now, this is the thing too. Now, you were brought into it very young. How is the Grange doing at attracting the millennials?
Well, here in California, our growth is really big in the junior and youth age group and young families, because we have what's called the Grange Youth Fair program. So here in California, and it's also expanding into other states, Grange Youth can show at fairs just like 4-H and FFA members can show.
Good.
And so here in California, the 4-H club is actually a government program run through the county extension offices. And because of that, there are lots of governmental rules and regulations. And,
Yeah.
and the price to join the 4-H club has escalated in a lot of areas. So we are seeing lots of growth in our youth fair program. Good. From families that are formerly 4-H members coming to the Grange. And we actually have a family membership program where your family, your household, can pay for 2 members, and everybody in that household has membership.
Good. So
if you have a mom and a dad and a 14 and a 17 and a 20-year-old in a household, and those kids, are involved in the youth fair program or not. But anyway, they only have to pay the dues for 2 people, and all 5 of that family are members.
That's wonderful. Now, what has the Grange done for you, and what do you think it could do for those thinking of joining?
Oh, the Grange has done so much for me. Developed my leadership skills. Back when I finished high school, I got several Grange scholarships from my local Grange, from the state Grange. I've been involved in the Grange for many, many years. I have friends across the country. It's given me fellowship with people, like I said, all the way across the country. If I'm visiting New York and something happens and I'm stuck, I know there are Grange members nearby that I could find my way to getting in touch with and get some assistance if I needed that.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And it's so true. I think a lot of people forget about that aspect of fraternalism is that fellowship that you have. I mean, I just went out for lunch today with a brother from one of the lodges I belong to, and I mean, you do have that kindred spirit, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, we like to call our state Grange convention one of the biggest and funnest family reunions you'll ever attend.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, Stephen, I appreciate your time today. All the best to you and your Grange, sir. And I thank you for this coming in at short notice as well. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'm available if you want to know more.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Bye-bye.
Welcome.
Stephen Hood, brothers and sisters, shedding some light on the Grange. You kind of sensed the history there during the interview, didn't you? Like, in the early days of the Grange, they advocated for rural mail delivery, right? And there's still a need to, shall we say, deliver messages and so on within rural areas. So now, part of their mission has evolved, and they're advocating for high-speed internet access in rural areas, right? The history of these organizations and how history and the needs and their activities change over time, right? And here's another thing. Mr. Hood is a 3rd-generation Grange member. That is incredible, right? There again, his family is part of the history of this organization, right? And here again, he belongs to an organization that has enjoyed 2 years of growth, right? And what I love as well is the revolving and coming up with programs to sustain that growth. I love that, right? I mean, organizations need to evolve with the times, right? Right. And he has 30 members in his lodge, or his Grange. That's wonderful. Isn't that great? And I love how the growth with this organization is incredible. I love it, right? They're reaching out, right? They're evolving, they're changing. And so it's wonderful to hear, that the Grange is not only growing, but they're evolving with the times. It's wonderful. They're in the message changes and things like that, but it's wonderful. That I think is just great. And I'd love to feature this organization again. I really would, right? I'd love to see how it's been wonderful looking into this. And it's amazing because, like I keep saying, from the very start of Points of Light Radio, this is one of the very first organizations that I tried to feature here. So, and it's wonderful that we finally got them on here. I really appreciate Mr. Mr. Hood reaching out to me. But that's all I have time for today, brothers and sisters. But before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, until we meet again, just step